Ladies and gentlemen, the name of today's webinar is, well, what's wrong with keeping my ERP on-premise? And it's exactly what we're going to cover today. Some of the reasons why it makes sense to not stay on it and why you might consider moving to a cloud ERP. So let's jump right into what we're going to cover today. First of all, introductions. My name is Mike Lemo. I'm a sales manager here at Sikich. It's my 17th year in the Microsoft channel, focusing on ERP and CRM solutions. Zach, would you like to go next, introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So my name's Zach Marshall. I'm a solution architect here with Sikich as part of our Business Central practice. Been working in the channel here about 9.5 years, former implementer of the software as well. Located out of the Chicagoland area, and I'm looking forward to sharing all about what we've learned and some of that information with you today.
And hi, everybody. I'm Tim Tucker. I'm a principal at Sikich. I've been in the technology space for almost 30 years, working in a variety of ERP packages, including Business Central, many other business systems and technologies as it relates to various industries.
All right, so let's talk about why are we here. So there are several reasons why it makes sense to come off of an on-premise solution. And by on-premise, we mean it's physically sitting at a server or computer somewhere on site at your company, or maybe it's at a data center, or maybe it's even hosted on Azure. But the thing is, it's sitting more than likely on a box that has either older software, if it's an older version, or older support systems. So one of the biggest problems is if it's on an older, unsupported software, it's subject to attack by ransomware, by hackers, and that type of a thing. There's holes they get inside of it. Tim, can you expand as what is it about older software on these servers that lets these hackers have access?
The most common things that we see is ERP solutions that are sitting on, for example, older versions of Windows that are unsupported by Microsoft or other operating systems, old versions of SQL Server that haven't been upgraded in a very long time. And once somebody gets into a system like that and they notice that, they're able to do things like zip up the database and encrypt it because it's because it's sitting on premise and it doesn't have the safeguards to prevent something like that. Then they steal it and then they hold you ransom for the data. So that's pretty common. People do an install once and they forget it type of thing.
Yeah, and a good point. It's you hear the term infrastructure, right? Infrastructure can mean a lot of different things. Typically in this world, we're talking about the computers and the networks and the systems, the electronic things that are linking all these systems. They have to be updated. They can't stay stagnant. There's either like anything else, they have a lifespan. There's holes in them. And there was a survey that said that 71% of people reported said they have low agility, means they don't have the ability to respond to situations. So it's not just the hacker kind of a thing. It's the fact that you can't do what you need to do. And I guess, Zach, you've seen this before. We run into customers that spend a lot of money on IT maintenance on these older systems, don't we?
Absolutely. We see a whole wider range of technology stacks at our customers that are often difficult to maintain, and they require a certain skill set and a lot of tribal knowledge to maintain and keep that piece of software running efficiently that way it meets the needs of the business.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for that. Like you said, this is a security function. First and foremost, the fact that it's costing you money, that it's a liability in terms of either being broken into. There's also another factor is that young people you're trying to hire don't want to use old systems. I mean, Tim, remember we had one person that was on a green screen system and they couldn't hire young people because they were all using smartphones that were more advanced than the ERP they had.
This has happened a few times. Every time they try to hire somebody because the person wants to retire, the individual finds out what technology they're running on, they decline the offer, and then the person that wants to retire can't retire.
It's a nightmare on that. So let's talk about, let's say you're in the Microsoft system, and let's say you're using Dynamics SL, which was Solomon, Dynamics Nav, which was Division, or Dynamics GP, which is Great Plains. Well, as you've probably heard the news, a lot of these older versions, they're out of support already. And there's two definitions of support. There's mainstream and extended. Tim, what's the difference between mainstream and extended from Microsoft's point of view?
The mainstream support is Microsoft's commitment to do things like fix bugs, fix issues, or if there's a problem that a customer is having with the ability for a customer or the customer's partner to go to Microsoft and say, I just need help with this problem. That's mainstream support. Extended support is none of that. It's really just limited to security fixes. They find a hole somewhere that needs to be patched, their commitment to delivering a fix for that security. So in this example, in the center column, you can see that all of these products have ended mainstream support, which means Microsoft isn't going to fix any bugs. It also means that more than likely, if your partner can't figure out the problem, their ability to go ask Microsoft for help is no longer there either. Microsoft will very politely say that product is no longer supported. In the case of extended support, if it's something as simple as or complex as a security issue, they will fix it and get that as a patch sent out to all the customers.
So if you're looking at security, if you're anything that's in red on the extended column, that means that's a guaranteed security risk, right? That's something that there's no more security patches coming from Microsoft. And that if you're an IT director at a company, that should be a red flag, right?
Yes. And the other thing too is that on the mainstream support, an important thing other than just bugs and the ability to support, the note that we have on the slide about regulatory updates. So for example, every couple of years, due to tax code changes in the US, Microsoft needs to issue new 1099 updates for the ability to people to issue 1099s to their customers. Well, once mainstream support has ended, they're not going to do that anymore. Now, maybe a third party will come along and do it and replace the core functionality. But any of those types of things that Microsoft would normally issue as a routine update are gone as well.
That's right. And Zach, you used to implement this as well, and you still get involved on implementations. Is it getting harder to find consultants out there that know these older versions?
Yeah, absolutely. So as the years go on and you've got legacy software running, and we've seen versions as early as 2003, 2009 of NAV and other software out there, the ability to support it and know that platform and resolve issues with that platform is becoming more difficult because you have to have people that are still in the workforce that are continuing to contribute support to those types of systems.
Well, the other thing too is if you can find them, they're very expensive because they are your most senior and skilled people available in the marketplace.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's the Y2K kind of a synonym, but it reminds me of that, right? Where it's a technology that's older and trying to find people before they retire becomes really important on these older systems. So,
it is.
Yeah, it's just very much like that. So let's specifically focus on GP, Great Plains. It was announced September 25th that Microsoft had been teasing that Great Plains was going to be end of life soon, but they hadn't given us a date. On the 25th of September, they said, that's it. We are giving an end of date. So let's talk about what this is. First of all, if you're on Great Plains, there is the older version, which, 2018, 2015. Then there's something called the modern life cycle. The modern life cycle of GP means you're taking 2 of the 3 updates per year to stay current. And like Tim said, some of those are regulatory, some are that kind of a thing. But what Microsoft just announced was very interesting is April 1st, 2025, if you're a new customer and you want to buy what's called perpetual licensing, that's where you buy the licensing, you pay an enhancement fee per year. After April 1st, no new customers on that. But after April 1st, 2026, no new customers at all on GP. So if you come to us April 2nd and say, I'd like to buy GP, we wouldn't be allowed to sell it. No partner can. It's the end of that. What's really important is, Tim talked about mainstream and extended. Mainstream support ends September 30th, 2029. But Tim, what jumps out at you in terms of regulatory stuff on that September 30th date?
Well, it's in Q4 of 2029, which means that Microsoft typically releases any 1099 updates that are needed for tax purposes of fiscal year 2029 in the fourth quarter. And that's right before the fourth quarter. So probably won't get, if there are already 1099 updates that need to be issued for tax purposes, they probably will not be issued for 2029. So you really should be off of it by 2028.
Yeah, we're definitely recommending people get off of it by end of 2028. Zach, are we seeing How are we seeing customers respond to this? Are they just saying, well, that's fine, I still got a couple more years? And if so, what's the danger of waiting till the very end, Zach, to make this change?
Yeah, great question. Obviously the danger is as you get closer to that date, the ability to respond to the needs of the business in a short period of time becomes more challenging, right? It becomes a challenge to push this in to all the existing IT initiatives and growth plans that a company might have. So as we continue to get closer to that date, if this isn't becoming a priority, then you're going to introduce more risk into the equation.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And why wait to the end? Because everyone else is going to be waiting till the end too, which means all that demand, our part is going to be brutal. All right, so let's talk about the overall risk, the general risk of moving from a legacy ERP to something more modern. And what's the problem with staying on an older ERP that's on an older? The first thing is the box itself, the computer that it's sitting in. As Tim was talking about, older software, but there's older hardware, right? Tim, these are using old hard drives and old systems on there. Can that hardware fail as well?
Well, of course, anything physical can fail, but there's a misnomer that, and I alluded to this earlier, that even if it's virtualized, that it's safe. Virtualized Windows Server, virtualized SQL Server, those types of things still require maintenance to stay with the current patches, the current releases, current capacity. And a lot of time that gets ignored, and that creates just as big of a risk of something failing, going sideways, as a hardware failure can.
Yeah. And one big thing, and you hinted on that, Tim, is that there's no new features coming out on these products, right? But yet business demands they're always there. Business needs are always changing. Zach, you gave a lot of demos of Business Central, and what's the problem with being on an older system? How does it, like all the new stuff that comes out of Business Central? Like, what are these guys missing that are on these older systems?
Yeah, the landscape has changed quite a bit over the last 5-6 years in relation to ERP living in the cloud. There's a lot of new features and functionality that are being put into the software multiple times a year that our customers are able to take advantage of. Not to mention, we might have old customers that are looking for those features and functionality in an old platform that just isn't up to par with some of the new functionality out there, right? So, our customers really have to look at, is it worth it to invest in new functionality or new modules within a legacy ERP system, or just get to a newer version of the platform where all that stuff becomes standard and the doors start to open up around functionality.
Yeah, the scalability point on there too is important to understand. Legacy systems, for example, had what would now be considered archaic ways of doing integrations between other business systems, but also between your customers and your suppliers. Newer systems have very sophisticated, very effective ways to do integrations they're just reliable. They'll scale up with transaction loads that never had possible before. You don't have to babysit them all the time to make sure they're running. And then, of course, everyone's favorite topic nowadays, AI, really adds more horsepower to the equation. I always joke around with people on old systems, there's kind of two ways to solve problems. There's a brute force method, which is you just hire more people to do it, or you leverage some of these new capabilities in the systems, like the extended Microsoft ecosystem, integrations with the M365 platform, AI, things like that, to really be smarter about where you're spending your money on your workforce.
Yeah, and Tim, isn't it true that to get AI and some of those types, that you have to be in the cloud? I mean, there's no way the average person could afford all that computing power to get AI on an on-premise environment, right? You have to be in the cloud to participate in that, right?
The compute requirements for doing modern AI shouldn't be understated. And so, yeah, when you're starting to leverage the power of the cloud, you're unlocking compute power that at scale that most companies just couldn't afford to buy on their own to do it in an on-premise type of scenario.
Yeah, really valid points, all of them. So let's talk about some of the benefits of moving to the cloud. And what we're talking about here is software as a service, or SaaS, you've heard, meaning that when you pay for the licensing in Microsoft, whether it's Business Central or Finance Supply Chain Management, you're paying for the licensing, but there's no more additional charge for the software on the server, the box, or the hardware. All that stuff, security, everything's covered by Microsoft just for the price of licensing. So, you mentioned AI on that. Zach, you've been doing a lot of demos of Copilot. What is Copilot, and how does it relate to some of the stuff you've been using?
Yeah, so Copilot is that kind of embedded AI system you're going to see across a lot of the Microsoft products, and in specific within the ERP offerings, you have Copilots as well, and those are going to increase productivity, whether it's through gaining insights with your data, whether it's through extending help documents off to your user base and so forth. So it's getting you to the finish line much quicker as far as what you're looking for within your specific day-to-day that in old systems takes multiple clicks and reports and different ways to gather that information, where now it's a few sentences in natural language, and away you go with some of those insights.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know Microsoft gave the AI, the Copilot, to all of their sellers, and some of the statistics that came back from surveying their end customers as well as their own people was 89% of those respondents that were part of that survey said it's getting the job done. It's getting it done faster. They're saving time. They're more productive. I know at Sikich, we've tried M365 for Copilot, and I will give it back. I mean, this thing saves so much time in a day that it's paying for itself. And I think we're finding that, like I said, 91% say it's helped them make more successful, and they're actually being more productive and saving time. So it's not just an ERP conversation anymore. It's overall productivity on the whole ecosystem, your Outlook, your Word, your Excel, your ERP, and the whole stack. And that's what you should be looking at. And so, Tim, how does this help? How does the cloud help with security and privacy and all that kind of stuff? How does that make a difference going to Microsoft Cloud?
One of the misconceptions we run into more often than you would think is that by having our systems on premise, they're more secure than in a modern cloud environment. And it's a control issue, right? So people know that they're in control of the security. They can take whatever measures they deem appropriate to lock down the environment. The problem is that you can't compare the amount of investment that a company like Microsoft makes on security. The average company cannot afford what Microsoft spends on security at all layers of their system, not just at the OS or the SQL Server or firewalls, networking, but also within the ERP or the other business systems as well. Microsoft spends billions of dollars securing these systems, and there's nothing that can beat it. So it is something that is a typical conversation we tend to have for people that aren't fully bought into it. But once we show some of the metrics that we have, that where the spend levels are and some of the mechanisms that are in place, it really is quite impressive.
Yeah, and Zach, you work with a lot of people that are new to the Microsoft ERP products. How it is being on a more modern platform, either help them onboard new people or learn the system or that. How does it affect that whole scenario?
Yeah, from an onboarding perspective, there's tools in place with these modern ERP solutions that allow you to just streamline the process of bringing a new user into the organization through creation of that user all the way through onboarding them with new training and everything, all powered by that Copilot assistant I mentioned.
Yeah, that's a good point. That AI search within the solution can find everything and even say, show me how to do something that's going to show that process. So, Tim, what happens to the cost of hardware that these guys are spending now on premise?
Well, there isn't any. So it goes away.
That's a trick question.
That capital expenditure, it's not just the cost of the hardware, right? So that capital expenditure for that type of infrastructure goes away, but it's also the cost of the other stuff associated with it, all the backup systems. You don't need that anymore. If you're paying for offsite storage, you don't need that anymore. So all the ancillary stuff that goes along with having on-premise hardware goes away as well.
Yeah, Mike, if I could add too on the scalability and flexibility component, that's a really powerful and important point to circle here, because in older ERP platforms, let's say you're a distributor and you want to onboard a new customer and you know that your order volume is going to increase exponentially over the course of the next 3 months. That was seen as a big challenge in legacy ERP because you're increasing your transaction volume. I might need to upgrade, the power of my SQL server, for instance, to put up with that. But when you're in a modern environment like this, the system can adapt and scale based on the recent activity within the platform. So that's a really important and powerful feature of being in a cloud ERP.
That's a good point. But what happens if a company grows that much? We've heard of competing software that charges for more money if you use more horsepower of the cloud server or a consumption basis. Is there an increased cost to the Microsoft platform if you get a bunch more transactions?
There's no increased cost from a licensing side. It really is going to adapt, and there might be work done behind the scenes by the folks that are monitoring that hardware to move you to a different compute tier, for instance. But that's all done behind the scenes. It's not something you have to manage as a company.
And the costs associated with it too aren't there. Microsoft's licensing model is generally per user. It's not consumption based off of the number of transactions or the number of clicks or things like that. So when you do scale, it's really the costs are really predictable based off the number of users you have typically.
Yeah. So when you're looking at the 5-year total cost of ownership, it's pretty attractive. In the total cost and then Tim, you talked about regulatory. The Microsoft ERPs typically have 2 major releases a year, and there's hundreds of features on there, but there's also regulatory and compliance things baked into that, right? So if they're on the latest version, how does that tie into, compliance and the types of things like that?
They're included in those fixes, and also because the Microsoft ERPs are sold around the planet, around the globe in a lot of different countries. Specific, what Microsoft calls localizations for those countries, the compliance necessary for those will be included as well. And in fact, even the where and how your ERP is deployed in the cloud will follow any local compliance issues as well. So, for example, in Germany, the country Germany has data governance laws around where data must exist for companies transacting in Germany. And so, Microsoft complies with that by having German data centers. So all of those types of things are factored into the equation as well.
Yeah. And then, of course, the promise of AI and anything like that is that it's not just the ability to do a lot more computational power than you could by yourself, but it's to surface insights to you so that you're not trying to run reports, stuff's put in your face that you need to act upon. And, Zach, I've seen recent demos where you've shown Copilot and analytics. How does being on a cloud platform help somebody either make decisions or affects their business?
Yeah, all that becomes just native functionality you can leverage to do your day-to-day. If you want to run a report and understand sales by region and so forth, you could just ask Copilot to get you that information.
Yeah, it's a big difference, and just to speed to value on that kind of a thing. So let's talk about this. So Microsoft is just releasing their fall release, or what they call it, 2024 release. Wave 1 is the spring, typically April. Wave 2 is typically the fall or October. And if you just take a quick look at some of the high things, you can see that, like in ERP, you're going to expect improvements in finance, supply chain, different things like that. But you could see how many bullets around generative AI and Copilot in there, reporting, Power BI, some of it ties into that. And Zach, does anything really catch your eye in terms of what's exciting about this fall release? Like what really jumps out to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, there's big improvements to the application areas you could see under finance and supply chain. But really, if you look at that generative AI section, some of the features and functionality that are being put into the product are rapid with each release. And for instance, create orders from chat. I can go into my ERP system. I can say, hey, I want to create an order for this customer, for this product, or this service, and it's actually going to do that work for you. So more of that work is being transitioned from the old way of doing it with just your standard data entry into that Copilot assistant, which has become really powerful. It's just really made the software more adaptable to new users and so forth.
Yeah, and I think we even have a small little clip of this. So Zach, maybe let's see what happens here.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's kind of an example of what that looks like. If, picture I want to understand how my customer AR balances are, and I could go into Business Central and I could actually ask that Copilot assistant for that information just based on that natural language input. And what you can see is happening here is Business Central is actually grouping that data for me, and it's showing me the remaining amounts by customer, right? So now I've got a really quick kind of AR analysis I can do, right? Well, what if I want to ask it, to add new columns to that report, right? And I can certainly do that. I can even ask this thing to create pivots and analysis directly within the software. This is something that you'd used to have to leverage something like Excel for and build, different formulas and drag and drop. But as you can see, a few sentences, and it's actually generating that report for us. And I can keep that information too. I built out a pretty meaningful insight, and I want to see what that looks like tomorrow. I could just save that. I can go back to it at any point in time. It was all generated via that Copilot tool.
Man, that's a game changer. I can't imagine how much time that must save an end user from having to create custom reports and do all that work themselves. That's a massive change on that one. So
yeah, that's just a taste of what's there, right, Mike? So there's a lot of it's everywhere in the product. It's reporting.
Yeah, that's a real good point. When we show those demos, people always want to see more and more and more of it because you give them a taste of it. They, Tim, we hear all the time, "Hey, I'm using Dynamics 365." We're like, "Which one?" And we have to realize that it's a family of products, right? And so it's not just a family of products, but we're not talking about just an ERP, Tim. What is this ecosystem? What are all these things on this screen? Like, what do they mean in terms of Microsoft?
Yeah, right. So the top line is all of the core Dynamics business systems, whether it's Dynamics 365 Sales, Dynamics 365 Business Central ERP, Dynamics 365 Customer Service or Field Service. And I'll note on the previous slide, one of the things Microsoft has finished is a really nice integration with Business Central with the Microsoft Dynamics Field Service product as well in this release, which is really great for construction companies, equipment management companies, things like that. But that's the whole top layer, right? So all of these applications that work really well together, depending on which ones you need for your type of business, but also all the other products in the ecosystem that also support those top line business systems. So the low code stuff on the left is all about creating meaningful workflows between both Microsoft applications as well as other third-party applications. So there's a lot of endpoints with Power Automate for Salesforce, for Marketo, all kinds of other things, right? Power BI for analytics, Insight and Analytics, the Fabric is part of that as well. And then the experience with the core Microsoft 365, the M365 products and the Teams, Excel, Word, with the core business systems is unbeatable. There is no other ERP platform, business system platform out there that can produce the seamless experience for users moving between these applications and having their data be surfaced from the ERP and the business systems in the tools they use most often, whether it's sitting in Outlook, answering emails to customers, and then generating orders straight from their Outlook, or Excel. If I'm an accountant and a finance person, and I spend a lot of time doing analysis, having that data just at your fingertips from your ERP surfaced in Excel, there's nobody that does it better than Microsoft.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's not just an ERP rip and replace anymore. It's looking at your complete company and finding out, how are we more productive? How do we do things better? How do we scale? The old buzzword was digital transformation. Now it's like, what can we do to be more competitive? And like Tim said, not have to hire more people, do more of what we have, free the people up to do what they need to do instead of spending all their time on creating reports and looking at data. So it's a game changer, that's for sure. Now, what you get into is, well, what should I move to? Should I move to Business Central? Should I move to finance pricing? Like, what should I do? Well, there's a lot of factors that come up. And if you look at what's on this screen, I'm sure it's not a surprise. Budget and timing are a big part of it. It's going to make a difference in terms of what ERPs are even on your list. But like Tim said, the way it ties into the 365 stack and the outlook on that. But what are your users going to need? What do they need to be more mobile? Can they work on a mobile phone or remotely? And all those factors have to factor into your assessment. So then the question becomes, Tim, let me ask you this. Do I need to hire a selection consultant, or can I just go out and shop for ERPs?
Right. So the answer to both those questions can be yes, depending on your circumstances. What selection consultants are really good at is a couple of things. One is they can help you really understand your processes. If you don't have them documented, if they're all over the place, and if that's what you want to do, they can certainly help you do that. The one challenge or caution about that is that when you go to look at a new ERP, there are often processes that are considered best practices or assumptions about automation that the new ERP can do, where you end up throwing out some of the old process. So you have to ask the question, is it worth spending the time and energy to document old processes, or do you want to spend your time and energy focusing on how things should be? We can't answer that question for you. I mean, again, it depends on your circumstance, but that's one thing to consider. That's kind of where the gap fit also comes in for the new solution. If you've narrowed it down, or you're going to use a selection consultant to help you narrow it down to a couple of industry-specific solutions that are common, they generally have a pretty good idea of where the gaps are based off your business. Now, they don't know everything. They're going to have to work with partners like Sikich or whoever that do those ERP solutions, but they have a good head start on that. The other thing the selection consultants are really good at is they generally have a handful of partners that they work with in specific industries for each ERP. So they've done a lot of the legwork to find out who the good consulting companies are. And their reputation is based, they make their money and their reputation based off of putting you in a circumstance where you're highly likely to succeed. So they do the vetting of a lot of the consulting companies out there, so you don't have to do that. Now, if you are an experienced company that have been on, a few different ERPs, you've done this before, and you have generally a good idea of, what ERP solutions are out there. You have your own business analysts, your own ERP analysts. You can go about this alone as well. It's just really a maturity question. How much of this capability do you have in-house versus not?
Yeah, it's a good point. And Zach, you've been through several solution designs with customers, and sometimes you hear, well, we want it out of the box. We don't want a lot of mods. How does the gap fit approach against, let's say, Business Central out of the box? How does that work, and how is that beneficial for a customer?
Yeah, it's beneficial to run through those core business processes against the software out of the box, right? And when you do that, you open up opportunities for improvement against the current process that's documented, right? And then you can look for areas where things don't fit, and if they don't fit, then it becomes an exercise of, okay, do we change our business process? We've been entering orders in this way for 15 years. Well, that's because the platform you're on worked a certain way, and now we have all this new functionality. So can we put in something that's best of breed or best practice in the industry as a result of that, and then can we mold your process into what Business Central offers, so we can change for the ERP and not change the ERP for us, right? That's the term we like to use. But there's many options to solving that. It starts with that gap fit against the current processes.
Yeah, and it's fast too. If you're gap fitting against a known entity, you can get right to the core of not have to waste a lot of time on that. So let's talk about, let's say, why should I stick with Microsoft, right? Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, there's something called a Bridge to Cloud promotion. What this is, if you are currently paying your enhancement fees on GP or NAV, for instance, on that, those are those annual fees that you pay to your partner who pays Microsoft. You get a 40% discount on BC licensing that's equal or more to whatever that is. So if it's $20,000, you take 40% off the BC licensing and figure out how many users that gives you. And for 3 years, you can have that discount to enjoy. And you're committing to the 3 years, but it's basically a way that you can keep using your current system while you can stand up Business Central with a bunch of user licenses, get with your partner, get this gap fit going against that, and not wait anymore. You can jump into this immediately without having to decide, oh God, the software, I got to spend the money on that. So that's a big advantage. And another thing is, as Tim said, there is nobody out there that we know that spends the kind of money Microsoft does, and not just R&D on new features and that kind of stuff, but they spend $1 billion alone on Azure security. And Azure is Microsoft's cloud platform. As they both mentioned, it's a familiar interface. It looks like Outlook, so you're used to that type of thing. Copilot's built in, the discounts we mentioned. And as Tim went over, the whole Microsoft stack, it's this whole platform of low-code initiatives, Copilot, the integration M365. I mean, it's, there's no one else out there that can do end-to-end what Microsoft can do.
I'd like to make one clarification on the expiration date for that 40% discount. that expires 2025 is Microsoft's fiscal year 2025, which is June 30th. There are no commitments on what discounts might be available after June 30th, 2025. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. And keep that on their fiscal year. So let's cite, you may have heard this if you've been anywhere in the Microsoft channel, something called AIM. It's Microsoft's technology for how do we get someone from these on-premise environments and legacy systems to a full cloud platform where they can take advantage of all the benefits we discussed today. Accelerate, innovate, and move. So, Tim, you're familiar with Accelerate. What does that sort of assessment and upfront step look like typically with a customer?
Another term that we use often for it is a discovery, where we're taking a look at what you have today, your industry, and mapping out kind of what are the modules that you would use in Business Central to try to help narrow down the software licensing costs. Are there any other third-party independent software vendors that make solutions for apps for Business Central? Would that be needed? And it's kind of creating an upfront estimate of here's what the migration plan would look like, your software licensing costs with whatever discounts are available, and here's kind of a high-level cost of what the services cost might be to move.
Yeah, and along with that, the innovate step, of course, is now that you've figured out what you want to do, there's a way to get into this and sort of figure out what does that process look like to move into the design. And, there's different partners that can do this. There's also something called AIM Modernization Centers. These provide partner-to-partner services. So, even at Sikich, we can go to one of these guys and say, hey, we're really busy. Can you help our customer out in this assessment and next steps and get it all teed up? And then it comes back to our team to implement. There's a lot of options out there you can talk to your partner about. And then once they have that, there's we've mentioned the bridge to cloud. There's also other incentives out there. Tim, you mentioned there's a deployment offer out there. There's one that's out there that helps someone. And can that be applied towards implementation costs? Is that what it's really meant for?
Yeah, there's a couple of different offers out there, and these offers, they come and go. So you want to make sure and check with your partner on what current offers are available. But there's an offer out there, yes, for deployment services. So Microsoft is kicking in funds for the consulting services to help you make the move, and that could be used towards training, data conversion. If there's customizations that you need to bring forward from a GP or NAV or just something that's unique to your business that you want, it can be used for any or all of those services.
Yeah, so listen to what that is. Microsoft is putting money towards your implementation to defray some of that cost for you. So they're helping with the discount on software. They're helping with the services. I mean, they're trying to get rid of all the obstacles for you to move so you can get the benefit out of this. It really is something you shouldn't wait on because this funding is not going to last forever. We've seen that before where it goes fast and everybody's doing it. So then let's talk some options. Obviously, talk to your current partner, whoever you're with, and just ask them, what should I do? Can you help me with the assessment? Can you give me some ideas? Because it's not just going to Business Central. It might be that finance and supply chain is the right fit for you. So that assessment will help figure that out and point you in the right direction based on budget, timing, feature, functions, that type of a thing. You can also email Sikich, info@sikich.com. We'll help you. We'll do what we can to point you in the right way and do what we can. Of course, Microsoft has a ton of resources, a lot of self-serve content, trials, a lot of things you can do yourself, even without a partner if you want to poke around yourself. And there'll be some information on that at the end of this. So a bit about Sikich at a glance, just who we are. We're getting close to 2,000 people. We've been around for 40 years. So in other words, who are we to give this presentation? We're a top 1% Microsoft partner in the Dynamics 365 space. And we don't just do ERPs. We do the whole Microsoft stack. So when we're looking at a system, Tim, many times we might start on the ERP, but have you seen it pivot to other parts of this suite, I guess, the whole stack?
It's pretty common where the conversation starts with a core ERP. For example, hey, GP is expiring soon. I want to get off of it. And they bring us in to take a look at what it would mean just to move off of GP onto either Business Central, Finance, and Supply Chain. But as we're talking through the process, we see they have a third-party CRM solution or a third-party manufacturing solution or something like that. And we go, hey, did you know that functionality exists in Business Central? Or, hey, that functionality exists in, Dynamics CRM or Dynamics Sales, and it has a native integration. You can do away with a lot of technical debt by adopting something, and there's licensing incentives to do that. So you might save some money there. So it's pretty common where we start seeing things and uncovering things, and are able to make recommendations to customers on ways that they can both become more efficient, but also be more cost effective in their technology spend.
Yeah, it's a great point on that, especially. And then we have other aspects of the company as well. And like you said, it's not just ERP, it's managed services and business application consulting. We prefer to take a holistic view on your company and look at where it's triage, right? What can be done right away? It may be that your ERP is not the first thing you should replace. There could be something even ahead of that, either from a security perspective, productivity, return on investment. It's not always the ERP. There's certain things that we want to talk to you in terms of it might help you now, sooner than later. So for Tim and Zach and myself, we wanted to really thank you for your time today. We hope you brought up some great components. Tim, you have any closing remarks in terms of what would you say to someone that's sitting on a legacy system right now? What would you say to them, either to get some sense of urgency on what to do? What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I would realize is, back to the point of Microsoft kicking in funding and discounts. Those are available now. There's no guarantee they'll be available once we get closer to the hard expiration date. If history is an example that repeats itself, we know that typically as the date gets closer, those types of fundings dry up because there's less reasons to give funding. So take advantage of it while it's here, and don't sit on the fences and wait too long. The other thing that goes along with that is, consider the resources that are available. You mentioned the Y2K thing earlier. Remember, Y2K resources got very expensive as Y2K get closer. The same thing is going to happen here with these expired platforms, these legacy on-premise platforms. So don't make that mistake either.
It's a great point. And Zach, you've had the advantage of seeing customers at the beginning of their journey where they're just asking for a demo and you're solutioning out of it to after go live and the benefits on that. What kind of feedback have you seen that people that go through this journey and they go live? What do you hear from people in terms of that type of a scenario?
Yeah, I think big functionality and efficiency gains. Night and day from what they were doing prior. Everywhere from what does look like to get into the software through do my day-to-day is night and day. The other component up to that is the ability to grow and scale and add new features to your business. So if you're a growing business and you're bringing on new product lines and processes, and maybe need to add another full module to the software, you have it all at your fingertips with a modern ERP, and then you're able to take advantage of those new features as they come out. So that's a really big, important piece to look at as you look at moving into a new modern ERP.
A really great point. Well, that's all for the Sikich portion of our broadcast here, and I guess we'll turn it back over to our friend Adriana at Microsoft. Adriana, over to you.
Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to invite you to take advantage of a free business assessment with Sikich to personally uncover productivity opportunities for your organization. We'll stay online for the next 15 minutes to answer any Q&A that you have.